kind of come back into their view and they think about it again. But they have no idea that during that whole time they don't see that inmate, pre-trial or post-conviction, that my guys and my women, my men and women, are watching over them to make sure that the people outside those walls are safe.
Right, and it's also to keep the other inmates safe too in some cases, and that's a chore onto itself.
Oh, the issues of self-harm are tremendous up there, and that's another thing. The men and women of the department have a tremendous responsibility to stop self-harm. Inmates constantly are harming themselves, attempting suicide, or just hurting themselves in a failed attempt to suicide. They're having to watch it, and every week we have from anywhere from one to maybe a few per week of suicide attempts that have been stopped. And that's very stressful because you don't want to be that one that failed to check a cell the second time, or when speaking with an inmate, notice that something's a little odd about them. Maybe you should have them go to speak with health services to see what's going on with them. No one wants to be in that position. It is very difficult.
Right, because everybody understands what happens if, in some cases. I understand that the Billerica House of Correction has one of 2 specialized units for the care of inmates who are
called an evaluation and stabilization unit. And what that is for the whole East Coast, the eastern part of the state. We will take inmates from other sheriff's offices that are having more significant mental health events going on, and more self-harm events, and take them into this evaluation stabilization unit to be watched very, almost minute to minute sometimes, but at least sometimes 5-minute checks, 15-minute checks, hourly checks, just to see how they're doing. Because the next step is sending them off to Bridgewater, which is getting overcrowded, and the state doesn't have enough resources to treat them there. So ours is sort of a stopgap to try and treat these inmates that are having greater mental health problems.
So what do you see for the future of the sheriff's office? I mean, you still have a ways to go, and you still have to run for re-election, which we hope you're re-elected. I hope you're re-elected.
Thank you.
And so, because I think that it's important to have a sort of a stability at the office, because I mean, you realize that it takes time, and there's a learning curve, and so once you start to get the idea,
right.
You
consistency is very important there.
It's frustrating for everybody, and a lot of people, it's an electoral process in this state, which I think is good to a certain extent, but unless you're inside the walls or inside the fence or whatever, you don't realize how destabilizing sort of that
well, and
process
it's interesting because when the governor appointed me in January of this year, there were a number of people from inside the institution that liked the selection, not because of necessarily the expertise I brought. I think that they knew that I would be very passionate and very intense in sort of my watching over this department, but the fact that I was also a candidate that could hold on to the office. The last thing they wanted to do was go through what they just went with Sheriff DePaula's leaving the office, and having someone come in for a year or two, changing things around, and then someone coming in this next election cycle, which you're right, I am running in this next year, the fall of 2012, and then to have a new person elected, changing over everything again. Very destabilizing and difficult for an organization, and I think that consistency and stability is very important. And I'm trying to make it a healthier workplace, for the inmates, through a number of these programs I spoke about and veterans programs, but also for the corrections officers. We've started working with private and public vendors, and our EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and the Department of Public Health to create a healthier work environment. And that's a number of the initiatives that I'm very proud to undertake and hoping we can continue to drive forward. Because again, we have a responsibility to watch over and protect the inmates. Right. But I've got a responsibility to watch over and protect my corrections officers as well.
Right. Well, it's sort of like if you take care of the, the correctional officer will take care of the inmate.
Right. 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 Well, they'll always do their job, but but they can suffer. Right. And their family can suffer.
Well, it's if you don't change the oil in your car.
That's right. That's right.
Something.
A fresh look is always good, I think, and a freshening is good, and that's what we're trying to do, is create a healthier work environment as well.
You mentioned veteran services, and I know that's really important because I know a lot of the people are either Army National Guard or some sort of volunteer process within the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. And so how does that play a part at the Sheriff's Office?
We're doing this on sort of two tracks. When I first came into office, I had a number of meetings with veterans organizations. They asked me to speak, and I ran into Secretary Coleman Nee, who's the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and I began to sort of want to address it, and we have begun to address it in two ways. One is with regard to veteran inmates, and the other is with regard to veteran corrections officers. So with regard to our inmates, we have now gone through, we are starting a program with the Secretary where I think we could be the very first in the nation to begin this program, a pilot program where we will have the Veterans Affairs Department come in and assess and diagnose people for PTSD, those that have returned, particularly more recently, for post-traumatic stress disorder, so that they can actually be diagnosed in our facility. They can begin the treatment within our facility, and then when they get out, they will have a treatment plan in place and contacts and case managers to help them get back out, again, to lower the recidivism rate. That's something that has never existed. The VA will not come into sheriff's offices, and so we're, I think, the first one to have them inside to diagnose before they get out. Otherwise, they get out, they never really kind of get themselves checked, and then they're back in again, and this cycle continues under this post-traumatic stress. So this will be very exciting for me to take care of those that have served our country, that are now having trouble, and there's a lot of those people in all of our correctional
because
facilities.
it's sort of a continuum, and a lot of people, unless you sort of are a fan of history, don't really understand. I mean, sort of started to understand it around the Vietnam era, and when you realize that people are getting out, they've dealt with atrocities, they get out, they're trying to deal with the atrocities, they get themselves into a problem, they're in prison, they're still trying to deal with the atrocities of what their service brought about, and they served, in a sense, they're in prison because of their service.
That's right. And they come back kind of messed up. A lot of times there's substance abuse involved, a self-medication, an attempt to forget what they've seen, what they've gone through, and that's really hard. And they come in with us. And there's higher numbers of veterans, I think, in incarcerated veterans now than ever before. And that's troubling to me, and I want to see what I can do to kind of get them back on the right track. And then also, we have a number of people that sort of serve our country. Right now, we've got 3 in deployment right now, and we've had a number that have been deployed and returned and/or come back from their veteran service and served in ours. And it's very natural, people always think, well, these veterans come back and they serve in law enforcement, police, or corrections, or others. And that's natural, but it means that sometimes you come from a theater, I don't know if it's an active war theater, but a theater of stress into another theater of stress. And they never sort of kind of deal with it, and sometimes they can suffer. So we began an initiative inside where we actually had reached out to all the corrections officers to find out who had served. We actually had a meeting just last week or the week before where we had 23 come forward, and we had a large meeting with them to talk about the issues that they face. And as Veterans Day is approaching, they're actually going to, I think they were trying to collect pictures of each of them when they were in service to put in collages that they could have up on Veterans Day, and maybe have some little coffee receptions for them on Veterans Day, which I think will be a pretty amazing, it's exciting for me to think about us honoring our own veterans as our COs.
That's interesting. I have a sort of a global question for you. As a past state rep, you've seen sort of the global issues of healthcare and its impact upon the state. Now you're looking at a microcosm of the same sort of health issues. How do you see that sort of relationship? Because what I guess my point is that I believe that the microcosm that you're looking at now expresses all the symptoms of, in a sense, a failed healthcare system in a more global perspective.
I think you're right.
Because especially with the people with the drug abuse situation, the self-medication, not being able to get psychiatric assistance out in the real world, in a sense, they self-medicate, they end up inside.
Right.
And so really what we'll look at through incarceration in many cases is the failure of our country to actually provide health care. That's
right. We are looking now at a sort of a failure on sort of public health or public health care and mental health.
Right.
We have seen significantly more numbers of those that are have addiction problems. Our rates are now 85 to 90% self-reported substance abuse, substance addicted, alcohol or drugs addicted as our inmate population, but a significantly also higher number of mental health.
Right.
And the dual diagnoses are really what we're now trying to assess right now. Those that are addicted to a substance and that have a mental health concern. Because which way do you treat it? Do you treat it for substance abuse and then mental health, or mental health and substance abuse? Can you find a way to treat them together? And this is really the new challenge, because all those people that used to, that used to get mental health care, they're turning up in the hospitals and they're
Right.
turning up in correctional facilities.
Right.
And all those people that used to sometimes be able to detox
Right.
out there, because we had much more programming at one point before the budget issues hit, they can't detox anyplace, and they end up again in the hospitals, in our correctional facilities. It's a significant impact on us, and it's one that maybe when budgets get better, it'll be eased. But people really need to understand.
But I think that what's often people lose sight of is that the sort of the poor programming increases the demand for budgetary dollars, and that's the problem.
That's right.
And nobody ever wants to commit to the actual programming and say, it's a tough life, but we're going to get you off the drugs, and here's what we're going to do for you if you can stay off the drugs.
That's right.
And it's sort of given verbiage, but it just, because if you could get them off the drugs and into a decent job, something beyond McDonald's, then you're not incarcerating them for $40,000 a year.
That's right. That's right. And, it's important. And drugs can't be an excuse for committing a crime. I mean, I think
Right.
we probably
yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
It's important that people serve the time to which they're assessed, because part of their recovery is being held accountable to.
Right.
So they have to serve that time. And I think we're not talking about sort of sympathizing, but they've got to serve their time to which they're assigned. But it is important for people to know that, just keeping people in a cage doesn't make people on the outside any safer. And in fact, it can endanger their safety. In Texas, as they were beginning to run up their correctional inmate numbers, right? They were starting to grow and grow and grow, and they were making it tougher and tougher on crime, more minimum mandatory sentences, so more people were going to jail. There was a Republican state representative, Jerry Madden, who was the head of the Committee on Corrections. And the way that they kind of looked at their inmate population growing, they were going to have to build another 5 or 7 more prisons. They're going to have to, at an expense of, I think it was $105 billion, right,
Well,
in order to house.
Massachusetts can't afford that.
No, Texas couldn't afford it. So what he decided was, instead of that, he decided to go another tack. Again, a Republican from Texas went with putting that money instead into diversion programs, substance abuse, more probationary programs, and retraining in educational programs. And not only did he find that, one, they saved money, but they actually reduced crime as well. And that's in a Republican state with a Republican
I lived in
chairman.
Texas, so that's a big step.
It's a pretty
right
big
there.
step, and if they can see that, then certainly, I hope that we can see that as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here, and
My
I hope
pleasure,
you
Rick.
enjoyed being here.
Thank you. I did.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed watching.
All right.
Okay.